America's very first war as a nation after independence is with Muslims talking and thinking exactly the same way. And let me just, before I say that, let me tell you this. What historians don't tell you is, what they do is they drop the Islam thing and they'll say, okay, the Arabs, the Saracens, the Moors, the Turks, the Seljuks, the Ottomans, the Tatars, they'll never talk about Islam. Okay, they'll just give you these national iterations and identities. And so from a secular mind, it's like, okay, different groups fighting different groups. If you do what I've done, and especially in one of my books, Sword and Scimitar, this is where I talk about this deep history and looked at the original sources. All those Muslim groups, the national groups, the Turks and Arabs, they identified themselves first and foremost as Muslims. And they rationalized why they were waging war, because it was jihad and we are commanded to do this. All right. Yep. So when you hear someone saying, oh, ISIS is, is hijacking Islam. No, we have 14 centuries of records telling us that's exactly how ISIS is basically emulating the early Muslims to a T. So when you see all the graphic stuff they do and the hateful speech, that's actually what the historical record relays for 14 centuries. And so go back to America to cap it off. Their very first war after independence is with those Muslims who are saying the same thing. So what happened is they started, after America broke away from Britain, Britain was paying tribute to the Barbary pirates, the same ones who had enslaved the Icelandic people and all that. They were paying them tribute to just leave our vessels alone. All right, it was, and the Muslims took it. It's jizya, it's tribute.
The tax.
When America broke away from Britain, America was no longer covered by that jizya. They're enemies now. And the Muslims, when they got wind of that, started attacking American vessels in the right around 1780s, okay?
I have never even heard of this.
Oh, well, it gets better.
I'm so embarrassed.
No, it's okay. Well, no, you shouldn't be embarrassed.
No idea.
The system doesn't want you to know this. That's why you haven't heard it, okay? So they start enslaving American soldiers, sailors, and torturing them and engaging in a lot of horrific things, okay? And then finally, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams go and meet one of the ambassadors of Barbary, all right? And we have the letter from Jefferson. He writes at Jefferson Jefferson writes a meeting to Congress. I have it in my book, the full letter. And he says, okay, we told him, we said, we consider everyone our friend, why can't we just have trade and get along? What did we do to you? And Jefferson writes, and the ambassador told us that it is in their Quran that they must wage war and wait in ambush and enslave all who reject the authority of Allah, etc., etc. And the way Thomas Jefferson wrote that, in my mind, he's paraphrasing Quran 9:5, which I told you is the sword verse, which literally says, wait in ambush for them, enslave them, and attack them. So that's what the ambassador told him. And of course, Thomas Jefferson, this great enlightened paragon, doesn't understand this backwards Islamic jihad stuff. Okay, so to him, it's so weird. But I just find it remarkable. I find
it so weird. Not because I'm super enlightened, I just find it like unthinkable.
So from the very start, you have Muslims preaching, saying it's because of jihad, it's because we have to war on them, and they did war. They conquered 3/4 of Europe. So Christian Europe at the time, or the Christian world, it had 5 major centers, 5 C's. Right. One is Rome. The other 4 were all in the east. It was Alexandria and Antioch, Jerusalem, and later Constantinople. All 4 got swallowed up. We don't hear about that. I'll give you an example of what the academics teach. There's a famous professor. I used to go to Georgetown University. His name's John Esposito. And back in the day, in early 2000, this guy was like the dawn. The intelligent community would go to him for information about Islam, etc. He has a book called Islam, the Straight Path, and I've quoted this so many times that I've memorized it, right? He writes this: 5 centuries of peaceful coexistence between Muslims and Christians elapsed before an imperial papal power play led to a series of so-called holy wars that have left a legacy of enduring mistrust. So what he's saying is that from the dawn of
Christians broke the contract.
From the dawn of Islam up until the First Crusade in 1095, okay? That period where Muslims conquered 3/4
yes,
and tortured and killed and burned churches. He calls that peaceful coexistence until the First Crusade. And while we're at it, the First Crusade, again, the big lie nobody tells you, is right before it. I've already explained to you, right, what was happening. But right before it was a really new iteration, was the Seljuk Turks. And what they were doing to Christians was horrific, okay? They were, we can get into the graphic details, but there was always pilgrims from Europe going to the Holy Land. And they would rape them, and they would murder them, and pull their intestines out, and they would burn churches, and this. And if you look at what they called, why Pope Urban called the First Crusade, that's what he says. He talks about that. But they don't tell you again that. They make it sound like, oh yeah, it was some colonial venture to go attack poor brown Muslims who never did anything to harm anyone.
That is the narrative. All right, guys, if you like this clip and you want to watch the full episode, click here. And if you want more content like this, you can subscribe to the show by clicking here.